Captain's Log, stardate 062020. It is the first day of what the Earthlings call summer, except here in Vancouver, where it is pouring rain. And also where, in hockey Twitter, instead of going outside, people are staying inside on their keyboards, raging angrily at a bunch of different things. Panic is now reaching a little bit in the streets, as there has been some spikes in COVID-19 cases. We discuss this and much more on the Hockey Podcast. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Hockey Podcast as we are recording this on the first day of summer. It is 062020. It is scheduled to be the longest day of the year, so happy summer to you. Happy Father's Day as well, Father's Day weekend. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_hockey. Like us on Facebook, the Hockey Podcast. Subscribe on wherever you get your podcasts, which includes iTunes and Spotify. We got lots to get into, so we will greet everyone here. Sean is here. Hello, Sean.
Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Good. I know that you will not be able to see this on audio, but Sean is wearing the retro Stan Smeel V t-shirt, jersey?
T-shirt,
yes.
Shirtsy, I think it's called.
Yeah, the Jersey.
The Jersey. I got to get me one of those. Heidi is also here. Hello.
Hello. I just want to also say for anybody listening from Calgary, Happy Neighbor Day. It's also...
Oh, it's Neighbor Day.
It's Neighbor Day.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Happy Neighbor Day as well.
Yes. Oh, if you don't know what Neighbor Day is, it is a day that was started in response to everybody who went and helped out with the floods that happened here, whatever year that was.
2013.
I think 2013. I think that's right. Yeah. So it's just kind of like a day of just celebrating your neighbors and your fellow Calgarians. So happy Neighbor Day to all the Calgarians out there.
Yes. Tyler, even though you're not a Calgarian, we do wish you Happy Neighbor Day.
Thank you very much. Good to see Sean and Heidi again this week. Missed you last week.
Yes, we did miss them last week. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little bit of a... Yeah, it was just not a good day for us to be on the podcast.
Fair enough. Happy belated birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes. Did we miss anything? No? Okay.
Lots of, the Pig and Duke is downtown 4th Ave location is now open here in Calgary, so we went there, and lots of shenanigans there.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Speaking of why we weren't here last week.
Fair enough. Yes. As mentioned, it's been a really busy week of hockey news, and the level was raised quite high yesterday when, I'll just build this into the sports part of this, because the Philadelphia Phillies started at about 10:40 my time here in Vancouver. The Philadelphia Phillies had 5 players and 3 staff test positive for COVID-19. Followed by the Toronto Blue Jays closed training in Dunedin. And then it was revealed that the Tampa Bay Lightning had 3 players and 2 staff test positive for COVID-19. A Toronto Maple Leaf player also reportedly test positive. We are not going to name him. A reporter did. I'll leave you to your opinion if that was okay or not. But it was reported. It led to a number of tweets, including Travis Yost saying, let's just be blunt about it. This is a disaster starts for the NHL and a return to play plan. And even Tyler felt a little off. Today has not been a good day for those holding out hope for the resumption of North American sports leagues. For me, frankly, the news of the numerous athletes who have tested positive is a setback that puts all return to play plans in jeopardy. So, and, I don't think that it's fair to say that Tyler was not alone in his tweeting and his perceptions of what happened. We'll get to what Dr. Hinshaw had to say about everything in a moment. But Tyler, as about 7 hours or so, or 17 hours later after you posted this tweet of the recording, do you still feel the same, or where are you at?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there's been great plans laid out, but there's always been this, well, what if? What if there's this that happens? What if there's some cases that come out? What if there's an outbreak? Like, they're pretty good plans in theory, like to operate in a bubble. But, like the idea that the NHL can operate in a bubble, I'm not sure that they can. Like, now there's still 3 more weeks till July the 10th, which they've set as a timeline for training camps. But, like, I don't know. Like, there's still no final sign off on all of this stuff happening, and they don't need bad news. And there was quite a bit of it there yesterday, and I think that's going to make a lot of people nervous, especially people that are in positions of power to allow this to happen. Whether it's the Canadian government loosening the border restrictions so the players can come in and set up in the hub cities. I don't know. I think it's just ambitious, the idea that you can truly operate completely in a bubble.
I'm going to let Sean go first.
Well, we've already gone through this with the Korean Baseball League, the German Soccer League, and the Premier League in England, and they've all done their return to play. They all had their bunch of positive tests that happened when they first started getting into the bubble and starting their return to play. It happens. Expecting the NHL to not have any not to have any positive tests going through this would be absurd, in my opinion. Like, it's not realistic at all. Yes, it is a bit of a setback, but I don't think it's a setback, a real big setback when you compare it to what else has happened around the world with other leagues that have come back and gone through the exact same thing. Bundesliga had 10, 11 cases when they first started up in terms of players testing positive. EPL had a few, as well as the Korean Baseball League. You're also going to get some cases when this all starts. It just depends on if you can find a way to contain it once you know and do the proper tracing. But in my opinion, I don't see how this is any, like, this was unexpected. I expected to see a handful to a low like 10, 11 cases that were the players that tested positive, as well as other people involved in this, because that's just the reality that we live in now.
And when I talk about all the test positive cases, I'm not just talking about hockey. I mean, there's the players, the baseball players that have had some cases with the Phillies and the Blue Jays there. The Phillies shutting down their spring training complex in Clearwater, Florida, I believe it is. Blue Jays have closed theirs in Dunedin. The Tampa Bay Lightning have shut down their facility. So, and then now you have the MLS and NBA centralizing their whole return to play in Florida. So now that kind of looks a little bit, at least. On the NHL's part, they've been quite clever, smart, really, to not name a couple of hub cities yet. They're probably not, entirely sure where they want to go yet. They got some options, but I don't know. It's just concerning, and it's amazing to me how many people there are out there on social media that keep calling for cancel the season already. I'm not one of those. I think you still have to try to find a way to make it happen. We can get into it later, but it sure doesn't seem like U Sports is trying to make it happen very much. But I don't know. For me, if I was going to be more confident that this actually happens, I was, not hoping to hear the news that we heard yesterday. And Sean, I think it is probably, should have been expected, at least for me. But that's a lot of news in one day regarding positive cases of COVID.
The biggest problem for me is that I think they need to get these players and training camps and training sessions out of these hotspots.
Yeah.
Like Texas and Florida and Arizona specifically are getting they're getting astronomical numbers. Like we're here in Alberta and BC, we got upset and scared once we got up in the 100, 200 range and everything. But Florida, Texas, Arizona, they're getting thousands every day type deal right now. It's kind of crazy. But get them out of there. Get them out of there. Get them to a safer spot where they can train. Like that's what should be taken. That's what they should be looking into now, instead of like training out of Tampa or Sunrise, Florida, or Dallas, like or in Phoenix. Get them out of there. Get them to a place where you know that the numbers are better, and you've got a less chance of creating a bigger issue.
Heidi, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like I have, both Tyler and Sean have kind of alluded to points that I agree with. My biggest thing with that, and Tyler mentioned this, is just this this outrage that came out on Twitter about how, like, the second that a couple names got announced not names, but like that players got announced for the NHL, like people were just starting to just shit on the NHL for even thinking they were going to come back and all of this stuff. Maybe it's just a product of how many hockey people I have on my Twitter, but like I don't agree with this whole let's just shut it down and you're obviously dumb if you thought that, you know, that they were going to be able to do this. Like that I don't agree with. I fully expected that there was going to be players and there were going to be staff that were going to get tested, like just statistically. And with the amount of testing that is going on when they are asymptomatic, like there's no way statistically you're not going to not have cases. Like I don't want to like if I really think about it, like how many people in, say, like my group of friends who probably none of them have gotten tested, who knows how many of them have maybe had it. Like, so I think it was a little bit blown out of proportion about we better go and cancel it now. But I really hope that the NHL does look, and the other sports too, like they do reevaluate their plans as to where they might have hub cities and where players are training.
So the NHL came out with a statement yesterday which said, since NHL clubs were permitted to open their training facilities on June 8th, all players entering these facilities for voluntary training have been subject to mandatory testing for COVID-19. Through today, in excess of 200 players have undergone multiple testing. A total of 11 of these players have tested positive. All players who have tested positive have been self-isolated and are following CDC and Health Canada protocols. The NHL will provide a weekly update on the number of tests administered to players and the results of those tests. The league will not be providing information on the identity of the players or their clubs. So 11 of 200, like if it was one single test, that's 5%. If you're doing multiple tests, I'm going to assume 2, you're lessening. So really, it's for me, the way I look at it, it's no different than what the testing rate right now is in Alberta, which has been between 0.6 and 0.9, even though there has been, the words have been used spike. I would rather use the word increase, and the reason that there seems to be an increase is because there's been more testing, not because that there is a spike. I think a separate topic for another time is the wording around what we're using for COVID-19. But to me, I look at this and I don't think that I don't see where we change plans. I think we have to stick to the course here. If this was 20 or 30 or a higher number, I would be more concerned. But to me, this seems like a reality of the situation of what we're going through right now. And the NHL, I don't see why the NHL needs to make any changes at this point.
Yeah, so the only changes they need to make are how to mitigate it going forwards. Talk with the teams talk with the Coyotes, the Stars, the Panthers and the Lightning and all the New York teams and all that and see, okay, where can we, if we're going to have this, where can you guys train and have your training camp and to mitigate this and to have it safer for the players and the staff? That's the only change I think they should be making, is they should be proactively looking at where these teams can have the training camp outside these hot spots that are currently going on in the States.
I do think, though, I think that one of the ways to fix that is, and I don't know if I agree with Tyler on this, that the holding off on waiting for the names of the hub cities was necessarily a smart thing. I actually think it would have been beneficial if they've named the hub cities sooner rather than later, because I think it would allow let's say it's Tampa Bay. If, as an example, Tampa Bay can go to Edmonton if Edmonton is the hub city and begin at least the preparation of your self-isolation, getting everything together, getting acclimatized to what's going on, and then getting set, and then you're out of that Florida cluster. Even for the Coyotes, if you can send them to, they can maybe. I mean, I don't think that I think from what I understand is, I think the West. I don't know where who's playing where, but if you can start moving these teams that are in clusters, can start strategically preparing, and if they have to come to Canada, get them to Canada now to get them into that self-isolation process, and then they can start training. To me, I do think that not naming the hub city until this week, I think was a bit of a mistake.
I disagree. I think that they need to. There's a certain time frame that they need to hit. They needed more information. Had they named him last week, I don't. You could. I don't think there would have been an opportunity where you could have done this the safest way possible, which is likely 2 Canadian hub cities, and likely Vancouver, Edmonton as your 2 hub cities, because of available testing, low numbers, and low population density, with the combination with the right facilities in a smaller area. Because up until this week, all we heard was Vegas. But are they comfortable when Vegas is already opened up, and you've got people treating Vegas like they treated Vegas before, and you don't know how do you shut down like a whole hotel and keep the players within their bubble in Vegas? I think that's one of the biggest questions that a lot of people haven't been asking. And I think looking at where things are now, I do think that NHL is seriously looking at 2 Canadian cities for the hubs. I think I do think that Toronto isn't as high up the list as people initially thought. So if you named him last week, then you might have had to change course. The slower and more pragmatic you go at this, the better the NHL is going to look.
And I think too they had to wait, because I think there's been negotiations going on in the Canadian federal government about what was going to go on with like the border reopening, or what kind of allowances were going to be made and all of that stuff. So it couldn't have been made before then. I kind of see both your guys' sides about like, yes, like maybe if it was earlier, we could get the players going there earlier, get them out of their get some of them out of the hot spots and all of that stuff. But like, there still just needs to be things that need to be figured out again by the government, by the facilities. I'm pretty sure that the cities that are kind of in the top of the list to be hub cities, I'm sure they're doing all the preparation that they would need to do preemptively, just in case. But I think it's going to be time now that to release these names. Do we have is there supposed to be a date that they're supposed to be announced?
According to what Larry Brooks posted today, and let me pull this up here. he basically said that camps, it sounded like everything was going tickety-boo and then nothing was saying, but from NHL GM's meetings, Post has learned that training camp is set for 2 weeks, with teams traveling to the respective hub city on July 23rd or 24th before playing one exhibition game. This Stanley Cup tournament that begins with qualifying rounds is scheduled to begin on July 30th. So, according to what Brian Burke said this week on Sportsnet on Thursday, he expected the hub cities to be named before he was back on his regular hits on Sportsnet on Thursday. So he is expecting it would either be Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday that we would know the cities. And I would agree
David
with him.
Pagnota from the fourth period also has the same, saying that the NHL and NHLPA are still on track to decide hub cities early next week, and he tweeted that out on yesterday.
Before Tyler goes, I think that the only thing that I see your point, but I think the one thing is like if you communicate to these teams, okay, at least prepare for the possibility of going to Canada. You can strategically say, okay, this is when we can start planning our training there if we need to go there. That at the very least, I think that. I mean, I think from the Tampa Bay side, if you're seeing the number like. I think Tampa Bay and Florida, if you're seeing the numbers in Florida and you're training there, I also think you have to give yourself a little bit of a head scratch as well if you're not thinking that there's not going to be a problem too. I think the club deserves a little bit of criticism. Anyway, but Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it was necessary for them to name hub cities yet, but I would figure by next week for sure. If they're still hoping for June 10th to be the training camp start, so because then you'll still have enough time here for this to all sort of work out with travel and isolation requirements and all that. It is interesting to hear via Larry Brooks there. It's not official, but it's a pretty good scoop there to hear that there's an actual date for starting play, June or July the 30th. That's when that gets out there, that gets everybody excited.
Yeah.
I do believe that the NHL has been part of what Heidi said, negotiating with the Canadian federal government about that. And the provincial governments along with it about the isolation period. And I don't think I think they are letting a little bit of leniency on that. You can argue whether or not that's good. But I do believe that they aren't going full isolation for 14 days for these athletes and staff that are coming into Canada. I think they're going a group isolation.
A cohort base, I believe, is what I was reading this morning.
Yeah, Dr. Henry talked about an idea of the cohort last week. Dr. Hinshaw did say, had some things to say. She was asked about it yesterday in her press briefing, and here's what she had to say.
The construct that we put together to allow Edmonton to be used as a hub city, if that is the direction that's chosen, includes two types of quarantine or of cohorting. And so the first is to allow, when teams come in from outside the country, to allow them to be in a kind of cohort quarantine where they're in small groups for that first 14 days, and they are tested regularly as well as having regular symptom checks. The quarantine that they're required to be in does not put them in contact with the general public during this time. And so it does mitigate the risks to the public of any of that potential transmission in the first 14 days. The second phase continues to require a cohorting effect. Once that 14 days is over and there's no cases confirmed to have happened in that group, the second phase of play would involve making sure that all of the teams were kept in a sort of quarantine bubble separate from the public to prevent the introduction of the virus into that cohort, which is now moved through that 14-day quarantine and confirmed to be free of virus. So I don't know the circumstances in terms of the Tampa Bay, Florida, the Tampa Bay players. testing positive. What I do know is that we've had multiple conversations with the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames to ensure that they understand what our guidance looks like, how it will protect both the players, the staff, and the public. And I believe that the protocols that we have in place would effectively prevent transmission.
My takeaway from what Dr. Hinshaw said there is everybody is on it. They're prepared. They are prepared for all circumstances as much as they can be. There is, of course, the possibility of things that are not expected to happen, but there's been some really good communication. And, if I'm in Vancouver and I'm in Edmonton, and if I am in Edmonton, maybe a little bit more, because I think Edmonton's probably better for this than Vancouver. We've talked about this before. I would feel safe with what's going on. I feel like Dr. Hinshaw has this, and everybody has this. I'm using air quotes here, under control. I think that the big thing that I think is going to have to go forward here too with both cities is just the educational component around it. I think people need to be reminded that these games are going to be going on without fans in the stands. I think people know that, but I don't know if that's completely computing necessarily. And I think just some other things that the NHL is doing. I think the educational component of this, I think it will probably be important for the next step in my mind. Do you guys see it the same way, or?
Yes, I do, because immediately when you said that, I thought I saw a couple comments on Twitter last night about how people are like, oh, all these sick hockey players from the States are all going to come up to our cities in Alberta and infect us. Like, it made it sound like, I was just like, no, that's not what's going to happen. Like, it's like, yes, they obviously know that there's going to be no fans in the stands, but I think some people are failing to see this whole idea that they're going to be put, like, these players and the staff are like, they're going to not be allowed to just go all willy-nilly out into the bars and the restaurants and the shopping centers and all of that stuff. There's a difference between them and, say, the reports of the tourists that are apparently coming up from the States and stopping in Banff and Jasper, saying that they're going to Alaska, and even if they really aren't. Like, there's a difference between those two situations.
There's clearly a degree of skepticism out there about the whole concept of a bubble working, right? Like, it just seems hard to believe on a certain level that there will be no sort of interaction between the general public and the athletes and of course the team staff as well. But we shall see. I mean, there's a lot on the line for these leagues to make this work, so they'll be pretty darn disciplined about adhering to the bubble.
The bubbles aren't going to be 100% effective. The Korean Baseball League has seen players and staff being infected because even though they've been in a bubble, but the job of the bubble is to mitigate and keep keep things down to a minimum. So I think everyone needs to understand that, and like both Kevin and Heidi said, I agree that education on how things are going to be done has to be for like very, very top of the priority list for the NHL. You're going to have people who aren't going to like it no matter what, but you're going to have people who are going to who don't quite understand everything, what's going on. And as Heidi said, what these players aren't going to have free reign to the cities once they get here. I know there was some talk of that, but I don't see the NHL wanting that to begin with, because that's again creating more risk, creating more opportunities for players to get infected. They want as many healthy bodies as possible. They want these teams to have their best lineup on the ice every game. So in order to do that, they can't be they can't be creating more risk by letting players go off to the mall, going to public restaurants and everything. I'm sure that there will be instances where they're allowed to go out and do something, whether it's to a golf course or a restaurant, but they'll be closed to the public for that day. And there could be a chance that they're closed to the public the day before to ensure that they get sanitized properly, or at least a significant time beforehand.
My biggest worry with this, and I'm no PR expert here. I think Heidi's probably the closest one to an expert on this. But if I'm the NHL, I team up with the civic government there. I go with with Don Iveson and Kennedy Stewart, and we do a joint thing and saying, look, you as a fan are not allowed to find the hotel, wait around for autographs. Make it abundantly clear that there's no autograph sessions that they're going to be happening at this time. Because that is one of my biggest concerns is the fans are going to know where these players are at. They're going to find them. That part is what is my biggest concern. And I think that I think it's incumbent about the NHL and the governments to say, this crap cannot happen right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody just knows that. There's just always going to be those people who just think that they don't need to follow the rules, and will try to seek that out. But absolutely, it has to be a partnership between the NHL, between the separate teams, teams and players and staff who are in those hub cities. The mayor of the town, the province, the federal government, everybody has to work together, and there has to be clear rules about it. And I would hope that hockey fans would not be jackasses and thinking that it's a good time to, try to get autographs and stalk players and all of that stuff, because that's just not cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we'll learn more as this goes on, but I think right now, Sean and Tyler, did you have anything on that before?
No.
Yeah, I think that, so I think most of all, we'll see what happens. I think this week will be a good telltale sign of where we're at. I do believe next time we record, we'll have the hub cities named. I'm inclined at least to believe, I'm still not sure Vegas is out of it, but I will go on record saying I do believe Edmonton is going to be one of the hub cities. I will say that. I'm leaning Vegas, Edmonton. That will be my final prediction, with a small possibility of Vancouver, but we'll see. That's sort of, I think everyone else is Edmonton, Vancouver.
I think Edmonton's the strongest chance of the Canadian cities. I still think Toronto's in play, mainly because that's the league's preference to go there. But
yeah, I think the league has a preference to have an East-West split, so that they can put the one they can have the West out in, say, Toronto, and then the East in Vegas. But I don't know. It just. Well, we'll see. If the numbers keep ballooning in the States, I have a hard time believing that the NHL won't end up doing 2 Canadian cities.
Yeah, I can see that as well. We'll have to see on that. Let's move on and talk a bit about the Buffalo Sabres, which is not a topic that we spend a lot of time talking about, but they had a week. They have had an off season to remember. Before to go back, the Pagulas were asked if Jason Botterill was safe as general manager, and they said yes. Then Jack Eichel spoke about how he hated losing. And this week, Jason Botterill, along with 17 other of his staff colleagues, were fired by the Buffalo Sabres. Kevin Adams, a longtime Sabre type, is now the general manager, and it's, at one part, this is really kind of fascinating to me in the sense that Jason, I don't think that you can look back on the Jason Botterill era and in terms of trades and say that was a good decision or he did a good job at all. But it really, this also feels like such a slip up. Like, I guess let's start with Botterill first of all. Like, what did you think of this move? We'll start with Heidi.
Well, me not knowing very much about the Buffalo Sabres, I will comment just maybe, sorry to not specifically say Botterill, but just maybe in general of wiping out 17 jobs. I believe that's what you said was the number.
Yeah, is
that clearly something is rotten in Buffalo, and they needed to do something. And yes, that I will never say that it's a good thing that people lose their jobs and lose their livelihoods and all of that stuff, but maybe just so they woke up one morning and decided it was enough, and they had to make changes, and they couldn't pinpoint one person and decided to clean house. Like I know this makes sound like I'm just evil by saying this, but maybe it just was something that just had to be done.
Well, there's definitely something wrong in Buffalo. We talked about this a few episodes back when Kevin had the weird opinion that Jack Eichel wasn't the go-to number 2 in his draft behind McDavid. But it's Jason. Like, ever since Darcy Regier left, they've been floundering. Tim Murray was hired in January 2014, lasted till the end of the 2016-2017 season. And then Jason Botterill had another, lasted until now from basically then. I just don't, there definitely needed to be a change. I thought they had more GMs since Darcy Regier left, but with it only being Tim Murray and Jason Botterill and now Kevin Adams, I think they had despite the fact that ever since the Pegulas have taken over, there seems to be something not quite right there. If you look at what's happened, I think there's definitely a reason to fire Jason Botterill. Now, the other completely gutting everyone is almost unprecedented. Toronto did it when Shanahan was hired. He went through and gutted the whole organization, but it's not something you see very, very often. So it is very eyebrow raising for sure. I'm interested that Ralph Kruger survived the purge. I think that's a smart move by them. I think that that's one spot where the Oilers and Sabres were going through a very parallel roads in terms of the amount of coaches they've had in the past 5-6 years. But I think that there's something needs to change in Buffalo. I don't know if this is the right way to do it. Hiring on a former player who went into business in Kevin Adams is interesting. So I don't know it's going to be very interesting to see what the Sabres look like going forwards, because they've, just like how last summer we were talking about how the Oilers have 2-3 seasons to turn it around before Connor McDavid potentially looks elsewhere. I think they've got to show promise next year before they might have an issue with Jack Eichel looking elsewhere.
I feel like with the Pegulas, they just don't seem to have like a vision for what they want in Buffalo. They don't don't seem certain as to what style of management they prefer. That they're like, to have this amount of instability in an organization and be cleaning house and making changes as often as they are. To me, that speaks to just not much strength in leadership at the top. And I don't know where they go from here. I don't understand the timing. And I always say this too, like, just because you ask somebody if the general manager is safe today, well, that was the case today. Three or 4 days down the road, things could change, right? So just because they say, oh yeah, Botterill's safe, it doesn't really mean anything, a few days later.
They had, so from 2015 to 2017, they had Dan Bylsma, who did win a Stanley Cup with the Pittsburgh Penguins, coach. And then from 2017 to 2019, it was Phil Housley, and then Ralph Kruger, who I do agree, I think deserves certainly a second year. Although, with a new GM, this isn't his guy. I don't know if that's how that's going to work. I guess my big in terms of the general manager part, I guess my question is why are they rushing into hiring somebody now when you have some time to kind of think about this decision?
Because they trust that Kevin Adams is going to give them to bend to what they want. If you listen to what was said, is that they felt that they didn't have a voice with Jason Botterill, even though they're just owners and they don't really know anything about running a hockey team. They want to be. They don't want to be left out of any decisions. And they brought in Kevin Adams because they feel like he's going to be bringing them in on all the decisions. So I don't know what that entails, but that's the feeling I get, is that they want to be more hands-on, and they weren't able to do that with Jason Botterill.
But wouldn't this be the time to explore what is wrong? Like, we mock the Oilers, but at least I'll give Bob Nicholson this credit. He at least took the time to kind of figure out what in the living hell is going on in the organization and find someone that can at least, they can work with in that sense. I don't know if Kevin Adams is Kevin Adams may be the answer to what the Pagulas want, but is Kevin Adams the answer of turning this organization around? That to me is a different question.
It totally is. The other part we haven't talked about is, I think there's a lot of what happened with the everyone getting fired and let go was money related too.
Yeah.
The Pagula fortune has been decimated in the past couple of years by the oil prices and everything. So he's not nearly as well off as he was, and I think a lot of this was cost cutting.
That's just amazing. I've had this discussion this week with some of my friends about good owners and bad owners. And to me, there's a couple of categories of bad owners. There's cheap owners, and there's taking the fans for granted owners. Are the Pagulas in both categories? Holy cow!
I don't know. I feel I don't know. I think they want things they do certainly seem to want things a certain way. And I also think, and that, it led to the second question here. As much as people were like, wow, this is a big shock and I can't believe Buffalo did this. Looking to next year and our next couple of topics, we'll kind of dig into where we're at here. In terms, especially if you're a scouting department, and in terms of where we are in terms of finances, our staff's going to be as big as we had them before. And it struck me when Elliot Friedman said when Elliot Friedman talked about that this may not be the first team that does what Buffalo did. We may see other teams considering having to cut some staff in some areas, and I can see that particularly in the scouting department, where we don't know when a lot of teams are going to be, when a lot of leagues are going to be starting, right? So
that, and it's the ability to video scout is becoming a lot easier with the amount of games that are on a streaming service.
Yeah.
When the Canucks parted ways with Judd Brackett, they name dropped Ryan Beach as a reason why they're still in good shape. So I do think that we're going to see. I think we will see scouting departments become less full-time employees and more contractors and part-time employees more than anything else.
Tyler, Heidi, did you have thoughts on that?
No, not really.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It'll certainly be that'll be interesting. There's been a bunch of, who's in a bigger mess? Is it the Sabres or the Senators right now?
Oh boy.
Well, I think you have to say Buffalo at this moment, but
I'd say Buffalo. I think despite the Senators having probably the worst owner in the NHL, they are set to actually they're still in the process of selling hope with all their draft picks and prospects coming up, while Buffalo is in absolute disarray where they should be coming out of that selling hope and they should be selling success. And when you're not doing either, that's when you start losing the fan base.
Yeah. I'll go Sabres here too. There's I may not be the guy that's going to jump up and down as much as everyone else in terms of Jack Eichel, but he's definitely a talent, and I still think Rasmus Dahlin, I mean, he may not have gotten off to the best start, but that guy has a bunch of potential. Like, you're at least starting with you have two good pieces there, but there's not much else. And that draft history of the Buffalo Sabres, the Canucks have been criticized for their draft history. The Buffalo Sabres have, and I mean, even the Oilers are being mocked for, but the Sabres, that's tough. The Senators have a lot of stuff going for them, at least in terms of hope that they can sell the fan base there for sure. We'll get a couple of other quick things here. The University of Alberta announced that they are suspending fall sports. And that includes men's and women's hockey. And with everything else, it didn't get the attention, as much attention as maybe it needs to. But I do think that this is this is a fairly significant thing, especially, I mean, we had Cody Curran on. He played at the U of A. Derek Ryan played at the U of A. The U of A Golden Bears U hockey program is one of the best in Canada.
Just to clarify, Cody played for the Dinos at UofC,
sorry, right,
not the Golden Bears.
Oh, why did I think he played with the Golden? Yeah, anyway, but Derek Ryan did play for the Golden Bears. It is a really well-known program, one of the best in Canada. In terms of what does this do for U Sports hockey? And
can I just ask clarify with you guys? Is it they're canceling it forever, or is it just
for
did
this year?
They announce it for
just for this year? Just for this.
So my thought on that is, now that you're saying that it's only for this year, I will provide some context for the listeners that I do work at a post-secondary, so I kind of not the U of A, but there's a lot of funding cuts that are going on in post-secondaries. That's not that's private information. That has been it's not really been blown up on the news, but it has been made publicly about just funding cuts going on in Alberta with having to do with post-secondary institutions. And honestly, and basically no post-secondary is coming back for classes in the fall time either. So I'm actually surprised to not hear that the Dinos aren't doing the same thing at the U of C, Mount Royal, because they're all not having classes in the fall time. So I'm kind of like, yes, it sucks, but I don't see how these programs were planning on operating when most of the staff that work in these buildings are also not working. They're not going to be working there. I'm not 100% sure what's going on at the other institutions, but the one that I'm working at, we have no staff at our building for the fall time, and there's no plans to go back to work until 2021. So I'm hoping that it's just going to be just the product of just the fact that the schools aren't opening and not. And unfortunately, and it's not anything else, and it's not these budget cuts, but the schools are trying to save money right now, unfortunately.
I kind of feel like, there's a good chance here that some of these programs may not come back, like, ever. Now, U of A is is a very big school with very strong athletic programs and a great, very, very successful history there. So, I would imagine most of their programs will come back, but I don't think that's a guarantee for any post-secondary institution. Once you make the decision to cancel a whole season and you have people leave and, what if certain student athletes decide to just say the hell with it and not come back? Like the ripple effect here, the trickle down effect is we don't even really know the full extent of it at this point. Like there's long term consequences, and to me, it just kind of feels like they're not even really giving much of an attempt at it.
Yeah, I don't know what the budget is for the ice hockey teams out of U of A. My background is I grew up playing field hockey as well as ice hockey. And when I was in my early 20s, I was part of the U of C Dinos field hockey program where we were lucky enough to have they were lucky enough to let a select few men practice and get the coaching and training from the Dinos program. But just before that all started, they lost almost all their funding from the university. So it was pretty much self-funded. And there's a lot of sports that are self-funded based off of sponsorships, donations, and all that. And I don't know what the budget is for the U of A ice hockey teams, but I bet you it's very significantly self-funded. And when you're in a situation like we are now, where lots of companies have taken massive financial hits, so you're not, and lots of people have taken massive financial hits, you're not going to you're not going to have the expendable income to sponsor and donate to help support these student athletes. So, as well as one of the big fundraisers for organizations, including the UC Dinos, back when I was part of it, I'm sure it still is though, was working concessions at the Saddle Dome. If you've ever been to the Saddle Dome and you have concession workers wearing white shirts and a black apron, look at their name tag. It says volunteer. They're there to raise money for their organization. And if they're not getting that fundraising, they're not getting donations, they're not getting sponsorships from companies, there's no way they can run these programs out with the funding that they currently have. So I think that that's definitely one of probably the big issues is the outside funding that is needed to make these programs run properly.
Yeah, and to kind of like to add on that, like for sure, like I think it's exactly what Tyler said. Like it's not just going to be, it's not necessarily going to be us hearing about one program not running just this year. Like we're going to hear probably more about things coming up, even when things go quote unquote back to normal, about athletic programs getting cut or just getting cut completely or just getting extremely defunded, because I feel like schools are just getting, like, post-secondaries are getting more and more expensive, and I can see why, being involved, like, within different parts of a school, like, other than being like a student in the past, that, like, where money goes, and it's just and when the government's cutting it, like, where does the money come from? And if right now with the COVID going on, the private donations to athletics and other parts of schools, if they're not happening, then that's what's gonna go. Because I think that thing is too, is that that's going to be seen as something that's going to be seen as the most unimportant part of education is athletics, which, I mean, I'm not saying that that's my opinion, but when you're sitting there and be like, okay, what do I have to cut so that we have enough money to operate this year and to pay all of our staff and to all this stuff, I think one of the first things that's going to go is your athletic teams, your athletic facilities, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely, how I see it too. Like, I think if you're somebody, running a university and looking at the balance sheet there, you're going to look at the athletic program as a luxury as opposed to a need, and it may never come back. I mean, this is not the United States, right, where, like, college sports fandom is just an enormous part of the culture. I mean, we don't have that here. So, how much public backlash is there going to be at losing university sports? It wouldn't be the same type of thing as you'd see in the U.S. if something like this was being done.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, I mean, there's a whole other conversation about how youth sports gets attention here. I mean, I think we're doing the best that we can, but that's one part of it in terms of that fandom. That's a good point as well. And then the WHL has a plan to get teams back on the ice for 2021 in October. They have appointed a special task force in each of the 6 jurisdictions in the WHL territories, which will work with government and health authorities to ensure the health and safety of players, staff, officials, and fans. Adrian Dix and Bonnie Henry were asked about the possibility of having fans in the stands for WHL games here in BC, and they said they would like to, but they cannot guarantee. The Portland Trailblazers, Portland Winterhawks said are one of the teams that said they absolutely cannot operate without fans in the stands. I don't think Portland is alone in this. I know other WHL teams have said that. So if you're the WHL, what do you do here?
You hope that, honestly, you probably hope that you can get some fans in the stands, to be honest. Like, because not all teams have, like, I'm going to assume here that, like, with, say, like, the Hitmen in Calgary, like, they're part of the Flames organization. So they're not... they're not going to be probably as pressed for money as, say, like, somewhere like Portland. But I could be wrong there without me not knowing the way that's structured in Portland. But I think they might have to hope that they'll be able to at least have some fans in the stands, or they'll have to get creative with some other way of making money, whether it is figuring out some way to broadcast games and letting there be a small fee for broadcasting games or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. The Western Hockey League specifically, if you look at all 3 Canadian Hockey League leagues, is the spread, the sprawl of all the teams from Portland all the way to Winnipeg and Brandon is just huge. Let alone having to, and they don't fly, they bus. So, like, the travel costs alone are probably really big. And again, it comes down to sponsors. If you don't have the sponsors and then as well as gate revenue, it's going to be really tough to be able to operate. So I'll be very interested to see what happens with the WHL well, actually all 3 junior hockey leagues in Canada, and whether or not we'll see some contraction in terms of teams not being able to operate after this because of everything going on. And I've always said, I've been thinking for a while now that especially in the WHL, they need to start I think they need to have like maybe 2 or 3 different sub leagues within it to cut down on travel costs. You can have the Pacific Northwest and BC, and then you can have Alberta and the prairies, and then you don't play the BC teams. The BC teams play the American teams, and that's it. The Alberta teams and Saskatchewan teams play amongst themselves with the Manitoba teams, and that's it.
Yeah,
you cut down on gigantic amounts of travel to help do that, and then maybe build bigger leagues within them, and piggyback off the AJ, the SJ, the BCJ. Like I think it's time to start rethinking how junior hockey is organized in Canada.
I'm in full agreement with you, Sean. I've talked about this before. I think it's time for that BC that split to happen. I can't think of a really logical reason why 15 to 16-year-old kids have to bus from Portland to Winnipeg for a 3-week trip to play hockey. Like I just don't see why that needs to happen. I don't think it's an advantage for them to do that, and especially in the winter. And I mean, we're very fortunate we don't have as many accidents as we do, but it's not a safe travel if you're traveling by bus. So, I think for a number of different reasons, I think that this is an opportunity for the WHL to look at a different way to look at this league.
Heidi brought up the point that I was going to make to do with broadcasting. I mean, one thing that I think would have to happen if they're going to be playing without fans is they've got to get some kind of TV network that's hungry for live content to pony up some dollars to keep it going. And I don't know. We haven't seen that to date. We've talked on this podcast before that Sportsnet, for example, as the CHL rights holder, doesn't seem to be that committed to the product. So would their tune change all of a sudden now? Like I don't know. Like it's a big concern. But yeah, the idea of cutting down on travel is one way to sort of cut costs and maybe make this thing doable. But it's kind of like with U Sports. If they wipe out a season, I think there's certain places that won't be coming back. Like the team closest to where I sit is the Prince George Cougars. Like they're a team that's not on that solid of financial footing. If they lose a whole season, will the Cougars come back? I would have to think probably not.
Yeah, that's the. I mean, and in places like Prince George, Kamloops, places like that, where I think WHL there's a good love for the WHL and what they do there. I think that hurts the cities as well. But hopefully the WHL can find a way to continue going in some way, shape, or form going forward. I mean, maybe they don't start in October, maybe they start later, but I do hope that they do have a season. I think it's important for them to have that for sure. And just to quickly touch on this because we are aware of it. We're not going to talk about this because there's a lot to get into, and I think we need to learn more. But Daniel Carcillo is leading a lawsuit against the CHL in regards to some abuse and sexual allegations. And it's a very serious topic. It's a very serious issue. We won't get into it. There's just I would encourage you to look online and look for the information. But I also would just quickly say be very cautious of what you post and who is what. And because I think there's a lot of facts that have not been out on this case yet. So for us here, it is a news item. We mention it. But at this point, we're not going to talk about it because there's just far too much right now to unpack at this particular point. Fair enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's just a lesson with anything you read on Twitter or in the news in general.
Yeah, of course. Yes. But, yeah. Yes. So, Sean, where are we with the pool? Are we prepared? Have we?
Well, we just gotta get everyone on at the same time, and yeah, we will do the Canadian team draft.
Okay. So we can
with no players excluded, Kevin.
No players excluded, Kevin.
Fine. I mean, we can promote that we are going to do this. We just are setting a date. We just need to get everybody together. We will do it, but that is the idea is that's something to look forward to. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there. How do we follow everyone?
You can follow me at Heidi Mazeballs on Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, everywhere on the internet.
I am Beardy Canuck 03 on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter at Tnoble, Tnoble.
All right, and you can follow Chris at... first, follow Devin.
Always follow Devin.
Please follow Devin. The poor guy, what is he at now at followers? So that we'll keep
15.
15. Got Gord Howe 09. I said it right this time.
You did,
Yep.
Good.
Yes. And then you can follow Chris, who's not with us this week, at SCH. And I make sure that I get it always right because I get SCHNEIDZ. And happy everything. Hope you're all doing well, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye for now. Oh, and subscribe, of course, on iTunes, Spotify, etc. Bye for now.